Every morning at dawn, a tiny girl walked 5 massive German shepherds through the streets. Neighbors whispered, mocked, called her parents irresponsible, until the day everything changed, and they discovered what those dogs really were. The first rays of dawn painted the quiet streets of Riverside neighborhood in shades of amber and gold. While most residents still slept peacefully in their beds, a small figure emerged from the modest house at the corner of Maple Street, accompanied by 5 enormous German shepherds, whose presence commanded immediate attention. Emma Clark was barely tall enough to reach the doorknobs of most buildings, yet every morning she walked those 5 massive dogs with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone so young. Her small hands gripped 5 leather leashes with determination, and despite the combined weight of the animals being easily 10 times her own, she moved through the streets with practiced ease. The neighborhood had opinions, strong opinions. "It's absolutely ridiculous," Margaret Foster declared loudly from her pristine front porch, deliberately raising her voice so Emma would hear every word. Margaret was the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood standards, a woman whose greatest joy came from finding fault in others. That child can't be more than 6 or 7 years old. What kind of irresponsible parents let a baby walk attack dogs? Her companion, Patricia Wells, nodded vigorously while clutching her small designer dog. Those beasts could turn on her any second. German shepherds are dangerous animals. Everyone knows that. Emma heard every word but kept walking, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She'd heard these comments every single morning for months now. The stares, the whispers, the barely concealed judgment. She'd learned to build an invisible wall around herself, letting the cruel words bounce off without penetrating the armor she'd carefully constructed. But armor, no matter how strong, still feels heavy when you're small and alone. The 5 dogs walked in perfect formation around her. Atlas, the largest male, positioned himself slightly ahead on the left. Athena, the only female in the pack, stayed close to Emma's right side. Behind them, Zeus, Apollo, and Hercules maintained positions that seemed almost military in their precision. To the untrained eye, it looked like 5 massive animals barely under the control of a tiny child. To those who truly understood, it was something else entirely. "Someone should call Child Protective Services," another neighbor, Thomas Bradford, announced from his driveway, where he was retrieving his morning newspaper. He was a lawyer, successful and self-important, the type of man who believed his professional status made his opinions facts. "This is clearly neglect. Those animals are dangerous, and that child is at risk." "I already did," Margaret announced proudly. "Called them last week. They said they'd investigate." Emma's small hands tightened around the leashes, but she didn't slow down. She'd learned that responding only made things worse. The neighbors wanted a reaction, wanted to feel important. By making her feel small, she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The morning route took them through 6 blocks of the neighborhood, past the corner store owned by Mr. Chen, through the small park where early joggers were beginning their routines, and along the fence of Riverside Elementary School, where Emma herself would sit in class later that day. "Hey, dog girl," a teenage boy called out mockingly from across the street. His friends laughed as they waited for the school bus. Did the circus lose their animals? More laughter. Always more laughter. Emma's throat tightened, but she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where they could see. Tears were private, saved for her pillow at night when the weight of being different became too much to carry alone. Atlas growled softly, sensing Emma's distress. The massive dog's protective instincts were always on alert, but Emma placed her small hand on his head, calming him instantly. "It's okay, boy," she whispered. "They don't understand." And they didn't. How could they? The neighborhood saw a reckless child playing with dangerous animals. They saw irresponsible parents who valued their eccentric lifestyle over their daughter's safety. They saw a situation that needed to be corrected, controlled, stopped. They didn't see the truth. Inside the modest Clark house, Emma's mother Sarah stood at the kitchen window, watching her daughter navigate another morning of judgment and cruelty. Tears streamed down her face as she witnessed the neighbors' contempt, heard their harsh words that carried through the quiet dawn air. "I can't watch this anymore," Sarah whispered to her husband David, who stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder. "She's being treated like a spectacle. The other children mock her at school. The parents avoid us at neighborhood events. Maybe we made the wrong choice. David Clark's jaw tightened. He was a quiet man, thoughtful and measured in his words, but watching his daughter endure daily humiliation was testing every ounce of his patience. We made the only choice we could make. Emma needs them, and they need her. The neighbor's ignorance doesn't change that fact. But she's so young to carry this burden, Sarah's voice broke. She shouldn't have to defend herself every single day. She shouldn't have to be this strong. No child should have to be this strong, David agreed. But our daughter isn't like other children. She never has been. It was a truth they'd known since Emma was very young. A truth that had shaped every decision they'd made as parents. A truth that the neighborhood could never understand because they'd never bothered to ask. Never paused their judgment long enough to see beyond their own assumptions. Back on the streets, Emma had reached the small park where she allowed the dogs a brief period of supervised freedom in the enclosed dog run. She opened the gate carefully, releasing each dog one at a time, watching as they explored the space with obvious joy. Even here, in their moment of play, they never strayed far from Emma. Every few seconds, one of them would check on her, ensuring she was safe, protected, loved. "Excuse me, young lady." A stern voice cut through the morning air. Emma turned to see Officer Rebecca Martinez approaching, her expression serious and official. Behind her stood Margaret Foster with a triumphant smile that made Emma's stomach twist with anxiety. "I've received multiple complaints about you walking these dogs unsupervised," Officer Martinez said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Can you tell me where your parents are?" "At home," Emma responded quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They know I'm here." "These dogs are far too large for a child your age to control," Margaret interjected, unable to contain her self-righteousness. "It's dangerous and irresponsible." Officer Martinez held up a hand, silencing Margaret. Her eyes studied Emma carefully, noting the calm demeanor of the dogs, the obvious bond between child and animals, the complete lack of aggression despite the tense situation. "How old are you, Emma?" the officer asked gently. "Young enough that I should be in school later," Emma answered carefully, having been coached by her parents on how to handle these confrontations without revealing too much. "And your parents allow this? Every morning?" "Yes, ma'am." "Because they're neglectful," Margaret couldn't help but add. "Any responsible parent would—" "Ma'am, I need you to step back," Officer Martinez said firmly. Something about this situation felt different than what had been reported. The dogs were calm, obedient, showing none of the aggressive behavior that had been described in the complaints. The child, while young, demonstrated a level of control that was actually quite remarkable. "Officer, I have documentation." Margaret pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos she'd apparently been taking. "I've been photographing this child with these dangerous animals for weeks. This is clearly a case of child endangerment." Officer Martinez looked at the photos, then back at Emma and the dogs. Atlas had positioned himself between Emma and the two adults, not aggressively but protectively. Athena sat at Emma's side, her eyes alert but calm. The three younger males formed a loose semicircle, their body language protective but not threatening. "Emma, I'm going to need to speak with your parents," Officer Martinez said. "Can you call them for me?" Emma's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back all morning. This was what she'd feared, what her parents had warned might happen. The neighbors' complaints had finally reached a point where authorities had to get involved. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd built, might come crashing down because people couldn't see past their own prejudices. "Please," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "They're not dangerous. They're good dogs. They're my... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't explain what these dogs really were to her, what they did that no one else could see. The tears finally spilled over, running down her cheeks as months of enduring mockery and judgment finally overwhelmed her carefully maintained composure. Atlas whined softly, pressing against Emma's leg. Athena nuzzled her hand. The younger three dogs moved closer, forming a protective circle around their small human. Officer Martinez's expression softened. Something was happening here that went beyond a simple case of negligent parenting. She'd been a police officer for 15 years, had developed instincts about people and situations that rarely proved wrong. This child wasn't in danger from these dogs. If anything, she was being protected by them. "Emma, honey, I'm not here to take your dogs away," Officer Martinez said gently, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. but I need to understand what's going on. Can you help me understand? Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Behind Officer Martinez, Margaret Foster stood with arms crossed, clearly expecting vindication. Other neighbors had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion, all watching with varying degrees of concern and judgment. They helped me, Emma said finally, her voice still shaking. They helped me be normal. Normal? Officer Martinez echoed, confused. She's not normal, Margaret declared. That's the problem. No normal child walks 5 massive dogs every morning before dawn. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time to step back, Officer Martinez said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned back to Emma. What do you mean they help you be normal, sweetheart? Emma looked up at the officer with eyes that held far too much understanding for someone her age. Because without them, I'm scared of everything. With them, I can be brave. The simple honesty of that statement hung in the morning air. Officer Martinez felt something shift in her understanding of the situation. This wasn't about neglect or danger. This was about something much deeper, something she didn't fully understand yet, but could feel was important. I'm going to call your parents, Officer Martinez said gently, and we're all going to have a conversation about this. But Emma, I want you to know something. I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I just need to make sure everyone is safe and happy. Can you understand that? Emma nodded, relief visible on her face, even as worry remained in her eyes. As Officer Martinez made the call, Margaret Foster stood indignantly nearby, already planning her next complaint. The other neighbors whispered among themselves, their judgments ready, their assumptions firm. None of them realized that everything they believed about Emma Clark and her 5 dogs was wrong. Sarah and David Clark arrived at the park within minutes, their faces etched with worry that came from months of knowing this confrontation was inevitable. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she approached Officer Martinez, while David maintained a protective stance near his daughter, who still stood surrounded by her 5 loyal companions. I'm Sarah Clark, Emma's mother, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through her. I understand there are concerns about our daughter walking these dogs. Mrs. Clark, I'm Officer Rebecca Martinez. Yes, I've received multiple complaints from neighbors about your daughter's safety. The officer's tone was professional, but not accusatory. I need to understand the situation here. Emma is quite young to be handling 5 large dogs alone. She's never alone, David interjected quietly. That's precisely the point. Officer Martinez looked confused. I'm sorry, what do you mean? Margaret Foster pushed forward, unable to contain herself any longer. What he means is that they're neglectful parents who use dangerous animals as babysitters. Everyone in this neighborhood knows it. We've been patient long enough. Ma'am, I'm conducting an official interview, Officer Martinez said firmly. I need you to step back now, or I'll have to ask you to leave entirely. Margaret huffed indignantly but took several steps backward, though she remained within earshot, clearly determined to witness what she assumed would be the Clarks' public shaming. Officer Martinez turned back to Emma's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Clark, can you explain why your daughter walks these dogs every morning, and why you allow it? Sarah and David exchanged a long look, the kind of wordless communication that comes from years of partnership and shared struggle. This was the moment they'd been dreading and preparing for simultaneously. Officer Martinez, Sarah began carefully, our daughter has a condition. A neurological condition that affects her daily life in ways most people can't see or understand. The officer's expression shifted immediately, professionalism mixing with concern. What kind of condition? Emma has severe anxiety disorder combined with a sensory processing condition, David explained, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's shoulder. Diagnosed when she was very young. The world feels overwhelming to her in ways that are difficult to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. Emma looked down at her feet, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Even now, even with her parents trying to help, she felt exposed, different, broken. I don't understand what that has to do with the dogs, Officer Martinez said, though her tone had softened considerably. Everything, Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Without them, our daughter can barely leave the house. The gathered neighbors began whispering more intensely. This wasn't what they'd expected to hear. Margaret Foster's triumphant expression faltered slightly, replaced by confusion. Emma experiences what's called anxiety attacks, David continued, his medical background as a therapist evident in his careful explanation. Her nervous system becomes overwhelmed by normal environmental stimuli. Crowds, loud noises, unexpected changes, even routine social interactions can trigger a response that feels like drowning on dry land. Officer Martinez looked down at Emma with new understanding dawning in her eyes. And the dogs help with this? They're not just dogs, Sarah said softly. They're psychiatric service animals, trained specifically to help Emma manage her condition. The revelation landed like a bomb in the quiet morning air. Margaret Foster's mouth fell open. The other neighbors stopped whispering, shock evident on their faces. They'd been so certain in their judgments, so confident in their assumptions. All 5 of them? Officer Martinez asked, genuine curiosity replacing her initial concern. Yes, David confirmed. Each one has a specific role in Emma's care. Atlas, the large male, is trained in deep pressure therapy. When Emma feels an anxiety attack coming, he provides physical grounding that helps regulate her nervous system. Emma's small hand reached up to touch Atlas, who responded by pressing closer to her, demonstrating the very technique her father described. Athena is trained in behavior interruption, Sarah continued. She can sense when Emma's anxiety is rising before Emma herself recognizes it. She intervenes, redirecting Emma's focus before the anxiety spirals out of control. Officer Martinez was listening intently now, her entire understanding of the situation transforming with each new piece of information. Zeus, Apollo, and Hercules work together as environmental monitors, David added. They scan for potential triggers in Emma's surroundings, creating a safe perimeter that allows her to function in public spaces without being overwhelmed. But why does she walk them alone? Officer Martinez asked. Wouldn't it be safer for you to accompany her? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Because the goal isn't to keep her safe from the world forever, officer. The goal is to help her learn to navigate it independently. These morning walks are practice. They're her proving to herself that she can be brave, that she can face her fears, that she's more than her anxiety. She's doing exposure therapy, David explained, gradually increasing her tolerance for challenging situations in a controlled, supported way. We're always watching from the house. We have tracking devices on both Emma and the dogs. But she needs to feel independent, needs to build confidence that she can survive outside our protection. Emma's voice, small but determined, broke into the conversation. The neighbors think I'm weird. They think my parents are bad. But my mom and dad are teaching me how to be strong. Officer Martinez knelt down again, looking at Emma with respect that hadn't been there before. Emma, honey, you're one of the bravest kids I've ever met. Do you know that? Emma shook her head, confusion evident on her face. Walking out here every morning, facing people who don't understand, doing the hard work of managing something that makes life scary, Officer Martinez said gently. That's real courage. That's being a warrior. Tears began streaming down Emma's face again, but these were different tears. For the first time, someone outside her family had called her brave instead of weird, strong instead of broken. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Clark. Officer Martinez stood, addressing Emma's parents with genuine apology in her voice. I came here expecting to find a neglect situation. Instead, I found a family doing everything right in an impossible situation. Officer, surely you're not accepting this ridiculous excuse, Margaret Foster interrupted, her voice shrill with indignation. Mental health issues are not an excuse for putting a child in danger. Ma'am, these are certified service animals. Officer Martinez turned to face Margaret with barely contained frustration, which means they're protected under federal disability law. Interfering with their work is actually a crime. Margaret's face turned an unhealthy shade as she processed this information. But they're dangerous animals. They're trained medical equipment, David corrected firmly. Would you question whether a child with diabetes should use an insulin pump? Would you call child services on parents who give their epileptic child seizure medication? That's completely different, Margaret sputtered. It's exactly the same, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. Our daughter has a medical condition that requires medical intervention. These dogs are that intervention. They're not pets. They're not a hobby. They're the reason Emma can attend school, make friends, and have any semblance of a normal childhood. The gathered neighbors looked uncomfortable now, their certainty crumbling as they realized their judgments had been based on complete ignorance. I've been documenting this, Margaret tried one last time, holding up her phone. Taking photos. Gathering evidence. Of what? Officer Martinez asked pointedly. Of a disabled child using her legally protected medical service animals? I'm sure the disability rights organizations would be very interested in that documentation. Harassment of people with service animals is taken very seriously. Margaret's hand dropped, her phone suddenly feeling like incriminating evidence rather than proof of righteousness. Thomas Bradford, the lawyer who'd suggested calling Child Protective Services, cleared his throat awkwardly. I didn't realize. None of us knew about her condition. You didn't ask, David said simply. You saw something different, something you didn't understand, and instead of approaching us with curiosity or kindness, you assumed the worst. You mocked a child who was already struggling. The accusation hung in the air, undeniable and uncomfortable. Emma can't always go to birthday parties, Sarah continued, her voice breaking. She can't do sleepovers. Loud restaurants overwhelm her. School assemblies require careful planning and sometimes early exits. She works harder than any child should have to accomplish things other kids do without thinking. And on top of that burden, David added, his anger finally showing through his careful composure, she's had to endure months of mockery from adults who should have known better. Adults who taught their children that it's acceptable to laugh at someone who's different. Emma's small voice cut through the tension. The kids at school call me Dog Girl. They bark at me in the hallways. They say I smell like animals. They don't invite me to play because I'm weird. Sarah pulled her daughter close, her own tears falling freely now. We've tried to report it to the school. We've tried to educate the teachers. But how can we expect children to understand when the adults around them model cruelty instead of compassion? Officer Martinez pulled out a notebook. What's the name of your school, Emma? Riverside Elementary, Emma answered. I'm going to be making some calls, Officer Martinez said firmly. Harassment of a student with a disability is a serious matter. The school has legal obligations to provide a safe learning environment. It won't help, Emma said quietly. Making them stop being mean doesn't make them be nice. It just makes them be mean in ways teachers can't see. The wisdom in that statement, coming from someone so young, silenced everyone present. Patricia Wells, who'd been standing quietly throughout the entire confrontation, finally spoke up. I have a nephew with autism. He has a service dog, too. I should have recognized. I should have known. You should have asked, Sarah said simply. More neighbors had gathered during the conversation, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Mr. Chen from the corner store, who'd watched Emma pass by every morning for months. Miss Emma always polite to me, Mr. Chen said in his accented English, pushing through the crowd. Always say good morning, always thank me when I wave. I never see problem. Only see little girl trying her best. That's because you treated her like a human being instead of a spectacle, David said, gratitude evident in his voice. Officer Martinez closed her notebook. Mr. and Mrs. Clark, I'm going to file a report indicating that all concerns have been addressed, and that your daughter's service animals are appropriately trained and managed. I'm also going to document the harassment she's been experiencing from neighbors. Are you seriously protecting these people? Margaret Foster's voice had taken on a desperate quality. This is absurd. What's absurd, Officer Martinez turned to face her directly, is that you've spent months making a disabled child's life miserable because you couldn't be bothered to educate yourself about something you didn't understand. What's absurd is that you're more concerned about being right than about the harm you've caused. Margaret's face went through a series of expressions, from indignation to embarrassment to something that might have been shame, before she turned and walked away without another word, her earlier triumphant stride replaced by a defeated shuffle. As the crowd began to disperse, many neighbors looking ashamed, Officer Martinez knelt down one more time to speak to Emma. Emma, I want you to know something. What you're doing every morning, facing your fears with these amazing dogs by your side, that's heroism. Real heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing the brave thing anyway. Emma managed a small smile. My dad says that too. Your dad's a smart man, Officer Martinez smiled back. And Emma, if anyone at school gives you trouble, you have them call me. Officer Rebecca Martinez. Can you remember that? Emma nodded, hope beginning to replace the fear that had dominated her morning. As Officer Martinez prepared to leave, She turned back to Emma's parents. "I'd like to come by sometime, if you're willing. Learn more about service animals and how they help with anxiety disorders. I think it's information that could help me be better at my job." "We'd be honored," Sarah said, genuine warmth in her voice. When they were finally alone, Emma looked up at her parents. "Am I really brave? Or is Officer Martinez just being nice?" David knelt down, taking his daughter's face gently in his hands. "Emma, you are the bravest person I know, and anyone who takes the time to truly see you will know that too." As they walked home together, Emma flanked by her 5 loyal protectors, something had shifted. The neighbors who remained on the street watched with different eyes now, seeing not a spectacle but a child, fighting an invisible battle with more courage than most adults could muster. But the fight wasn't over, not by a long way, because tomorrow Emma would have to face school, and there the challenges would be even greater than anything the neighborhood had thrown at her. Riverside Elementary School rose like a fortress of noise and chaos, everything Emma's nervous system identified as dangerous. The building itself wasn't threatening, just standard institutional architecture with 2 bright hallways and 2 loud bells. But for Emma, crossing that threshold every day required the same courage soldiers needed entering battle. Sarah drove Emma to school that morning, the 5 service dogs secured in their specially modified van. The morning's confrontation with the neighbors had taken its toll, and Emma's parents decided she needed extra support today. "Remember what we practiced," Sarah said gently as they pulled into the school drop-off zone. "If you start feeling overwhelmed, Atlas can help. If you need to step out of class, Mrs. Peterson knows to let you take a break." Emma nodded, but her hands were already trembling. Through the van windows, she could see other children streaming into the building, laughing, shouting, pushing each other playfully. Normal kids doing normal things that felt impossible to someone whose brain interpreted every unexpected touch as a threat, every loud noise as an alarm. "Mom, do I have to go?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Can't I just do homeschool like we talked about?" Sarah's heart broke for the 100th time that week. "Baby, we've been through this. Running away from hard things doesn't make them less hard. It just makes your world smaller." "But my world already is small," Emma said, tears threatening. "Maybe it's supposed to be small. Maybe I'm supposed to be different. Different doesn't mean less than." Sarah turned in her seat to face her daughter directly. "Different means you have to work harder for things other kids get easily. But Emma, you're doing that work. Every single day, you're doing that work." Atlas, sensing Emma's rising anxiety, moved closer in the van, pressing his substantial weight against her small frame. The deep pressure immediately began calming her nervous system, exactly as he'd been trained to do. "That's it, baby. Breathe with Atlas. Feel his weight. You're safe. You're strong. You can do this." When Emma's breathing steadied, they exited the van together. The sight of a small child emerging with 5 massive German shepherds immediately drew attention, as it always did. "Oh my gosh, it's Dog Girl," a voice called out mockingly. "Emma, the weird girl, is here. Does she sleep in a doghouse?" Laughter rippled through the crowd of students waiting for the first bell. Emma's hands tightened on the leashes, but she kept walking, kept breathing, kept moving forward, even though every instinct screamed at her to turn around and run. Principal Howard Chen, Mr. Chen's nephew, and a man who'd been briefed extensively about Emma's condition, stood at the entrance specifically to intercept her arrival. He was young for a principal, energetic, and genuinely passionate about creating inclusive environments, but even his best intentions couldn't control every interaction in a building full of children. "Good morning, Emma," Principal Chen said warmly, completely ignoring the mocking students. "Your team looks ready for a good day." Emma managed a small smile. Principal Chen was one of the few adults at school who saw her dogs as what they were, not as an inconvenience or spectacle. "We have a new student starting today," Principal Chen continued as they walked through the entrance together. "Transferred from Oakwood Academy. I thought maybe you could help him feel welcome during lunch." Emma's anxiety spiked immediately. New people were unpredictable. New people asked questions. New people stared at her dogs and made her feel like an exhibit. "I don't know if I can," Emma admitted quietly. "I think you'd be perfect for it," Principal Chen said. "He's having a hard time adjusting too. Sometimes people who understand difficult things can help each other." Before Emma could respond, The first bell rang. The sound, to most students, was just a signal to head to class. To Emma, it was an assault. Loud, shrill, unexpected despite being on the exact same schedule every single day. Her hands flew to her ears, her body tensing with the need to escape. Athena responded immediately, pushing her body between Emma and the crowd of students rushing past. Zeus, Apollo, and Hercules formed their protective perimeter, creating space that allowed Emma to recover without being jostled by the crowd. "Good dogs," Principal Chen said quietly, recognizing the coordinated response. "Emma, take your time. I'll let Mrs. Peterson know you might be a few minutes late." Emma nodded, focusing on her breathing, on Atlas's pressure, on Athena's interrupting presence that pulled her attention away from the panic spiral. Slowly, her nervous system calmed enough to function. By the time she reached her classroom, most students were already seated. Mrs. Peterson, her teacher, was one of the few who truly understood Emma's condition and made genuine efforts to accommodate it. She'd rearranged the classroom so Emma could sit in the back corner with enough space for all 5 dogs to settle around her desk. "Welcome, Emma," Mrs. Peterson said with a warm smile that didn't draw attention to her late arrival. "We're just getting started on morning journals." Emma slid into her seat, the dogs immediately taking their positions. Atlas at her feet providing grounding pressure. Athena beside her chair for immediate intervention if needed. Zeus, Apollo, and Hercules arranged in their standard protective formation. "Look, the dog girl needs her whole pack just to do homework," a voice whispered from 3 rows ahead. Giggles erupted from nearby students. "Dylan, that's enough," Mrs. Peterson said sharply. "Focus on your own journal." But the damage was done. Emma felt the familiar heat of embarrassment flooding her face, the tightness in her chest that signaled anxiety rising. Her pencil shook as she tried to write, the words on the page blurring through tears she refused to let fall. "Emma," Mrs. Peterson appeared beside her desk, kneeling down to speak quietly. "Do you need a break? The resource room is available." The resource room was Emma's sanctuary, a quiet space where she could decompress when the regular classroom became too overwhelming. But using it meant walking through the hallways, meant more stares, more whispers, more confirmation that she was different. "I'm okay," Emma whispered, though she wasn't. She was never okay at school. She just got through it, minute by minute, hour by hour, until she could escape back to the safety of home. The morning dragged on with excruciating slowness. Math class where Emma struggled to concentrate while students around her chatted and laughed. Reading time where she lost herself in a book but was jerked back to reality every time someone dropped a pencil or scraped a chair. Science class, where a surprise demonstration with loud popping sounds sent her into a full anxiety attack that required 20 minutes in the resource room to recover from. By lunchtime, Emma was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Emotional regulation took energy. Constant vigilance took energy. Existing in a world not designed for her nervous system took energy that left her depleted before the day was half over. The cafeteria was Emma's least favorite place in the entire school. Too loud, too crowded, too chaotic. She'd been eating lunch in the resource room for weeks, but today Principal Chen had asked her to sit in the cafeteria to meet the new student. "You can do this," Emma whispered to herself as she entered the cafeteria with her 5 companions. "Just 30 minutes. You can survive 30 minutes." Every head turned as she walked in. The cafeteria fell into that strange hush that happens when something unusual disrupts the normal flow. Then the whispers started, spreading like wildfire. "Dog girl is in the cafeteria. Why does she get to bring animals to lunch? That's so unfair. I want to bring my dog to school." Emma found an empty table in the corner, as far from the main traffic flow as possible. The dogs arranged themselves in their protective formation, while Emma unpacked her lunch with trembling hands. Excuse me? Are you Emma?" Emma looked up to see a boy standing a respectful distance away, his body language uncertain but not mocking. He was taller than most kids in their grade, with an awkward posture that suggested he hadn't quite grown into his height yet. "I'm Marcus," he continued. "Principal Chen said maybe I could sit with you?" Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus sat down across from her, his eyes immediately drawn to the 5 dogs, but showing curiosity rather than judgment. "Those are service dogs, right?" Marcus asked. My cousin has one for his diabetes. Emma nodded again, surprised by the matter-of-fact way Marcus discussed it. Most students either avoided the topic entirely or asked invasive questions that made her uncomfortable. That's cool, Marcus said simply, pulling out his own lunch. I've always thought service dogs were amazing. Like, they're doing actual medical work, but they're also just dogs being awesome. For the first time all day, Emma felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. What kind of service dog does your cousin have? A golden retriever. Her name is Maple. She can detect when his blood sugar drops before he even feels it himself. Marcus took a bite of his sandwich. My cousin says she's saved his life at least 3 times. Atlas has saved my life too, Emma said quietly. Not from blood sugar, but from my brain being mean to me. Marcus looked at her with understanding that seemed too mature for his age. Anxiety? Emma nodded, stunned that he'd understood so quickly. My older sister has it, Marcus explained. Really bad. She couldn't leave her room for almost a year. She's better now with therapy and medication, but it was scary for a while. For the first time since starting at Riverside Elementary, Emma felt like someone actually understood. Not just intellectually, but in a way that came from real experience. Why did you transfer schools? Emma asked, her voice stronger now. Marcus's expression darkened. I was getting bullied at my old school. Really bad. The principal said she couldn't control it anymore. Recommended we find a new environment. What were they bullying you about? I'm dyslexic, Marcus said. I read really slowly, and I get letters mixed up. Some kids thought that meant I was stupid. They'd make fun of me every time I had to read out loud in class. Emma felt a surge of connection with this awkward boy who'd been brave enough to sit with the weird dog girl on his first day. They were both different, both struggling with invisible challenges in a world that valued conformity. I get bullied too, Emma admitted. They call me Dog Girl. They bark at me in the hallways. They say I'm weird because I need help with things they think should be easy. People are scared of different, Marcus said with the wisdom of someone who'd learned this lesson painfully. It makes them uncomfortable, so they try to make us uncomfortable back. Like if they can make us feel bad, they'll feel better about themselves. Before Emma could respond, a lunch tray slammed down at their table. Dylan Williams, the same student who'd mocked her in class, stood with a group of his friends, all wearing expressions that promised trouble. Look, it's Dog Girl and the new kid, Dylan announced loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. Perfect match, 2 weirdos together. Marcus started to stand up, but Emma put her hand on his arm, stopping him. She'd learned that responding to Dylan only made things worse. I'm talking to you, Dylan said, leaning closer. Don't you ignore me, freak. Atlas growled softly, a warning sound that made Dylan take a step back. The massive dog hadn't moved from his position at Emma's feet, but the message was clear. This child was protected. Your attack dogs can't save you forever, Dylan said, trying to recover his bravado. Eventually you'll be alone, and then we'll see how brave you are. Dylan Williams, principal's office now. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Peterson standing behind Dylan, her expression furious. She'd been monitoring the cafeteria, as teachers did during lunch duty, and had witnessed the entire interaction. I wasn't doing anything, Dylan protested. I was just... You were harassing a student with a disability, which is a serious offense, Mrs. Peterson interrupted. Principal Chen, now! As Dylan was escorted away, his friends melting back into the cafeteria crowd, Marcus looked at Emma with new respect. Does that happen a lot? Every day, Emma said simply. Some days worse than others. That's horrible. It's just my normal. It shouldn't be, Marcus said firmly. You shouldn't have to accept being treated badly just because some people are ignorant. Emma looked at this new friend, this boy who understood being different, and felt something she hadn't felt at school in months. Hope. Maybe she wasn't completely alone after all. The rest of lunch passed peacefully. Emma and Marcus talking about their favorite books, their least favorite subjects, and the strange experience of navigating a world that didn't quite fit their needs. By the time the bell rang, Emma realized she'd spent 30 minutes in the cafeteria without a single anxiety attack. Can we have lunch together again tomorrow? Marcus asked as they prepared to head to their next classes. I'd like that, Emma said, meaning it completely. As Emma walked through the hallways to her next class, dogs flanking her as always, she held her head slightly higher. Dylan's mockery still stung. The stares still hurt. The constant vigilance still exhausted her. But now she had an ally. Someone who saw her as more than just the weird dog girl. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And sometimes, something was enough to keep going. The days following the confrontation with Officer Martinez brought subtle but noticeable changes to the neighborhood. Margaret Foster no longer stood on her porch making loud comments during Emma's morning walks. Patricia Wells now offered tentative smiles instead of judgmental stares. Thomas Bradford had even nodded respectfully one morning, though he still couldn't quite meet Emma's eyes. But change in adults came slowly, cautiously, weighted down by the embarrassment of having been so wrong about something they'd been so certain about. Change in children, however, could be surprisingly swift. Emma and Marcus had been eating lunch together for over a week now, their friendship growing stronger with each shared meal. Marcus had a way of making the cafeteria feel less overwhelming, his presence providing a different kind of support than what the dogs offered. Where Atlas provided physical grounding and Athena provided behavioral intervention, Marcus provided something equally important, understanding. "My sister wanted me to ask you something," Marcus said one lunch period, his tone hesitant. "She's been following your story since everyone in the neighborhood is talking about it. She wants to know if maybe you'd talk to her sometime about managing anxiety." Emma looked up from her sandwich, surprised. "Your sister wants to talk to me?" "She says you're doing something she never learned how to do," Marcus explained. "You're facing your anxiety instead of hiding from it. She spent a whole year in her room because she was too scared to face the world. But you face it every single day." The idea that someone older, someone who'd struggled longer, might see Emma as having wisdom to share was almost incomprehensible. Emma had spent so long seeing herself as broken, as less than, as the weird girl who couldn't do normal things. "I'm not brave," Emma said quietly. I don't have a choice. I have to go to school. I have to learn to live in the world." "That's exactly what makes it brave," Marcus countered. "Brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being terrified and doing the thing anyway." Before Emma could respond, a commotion at the cafeteria entrance drew everyone's attention. Principal Chen was escorting a woman who looked vaguely familiar, though Emma couldn't place where she'd seen her before. "Students, I'd like your attention, please." Principal Chen's voice cut through the cafeteria noise. "We have a special visitor today. This is Dr. Rachel Morrison from the Children's Hospital. She's here to talk about an important program." "Doctor." Morrison stepped forward, her warm smile encompassing the entire cafeteria. She was younger than Emma expected for a doctor, with an energy that immediately commanded attention without demanding it. "Thank you, Principal Chen. Students, I'm here today to talk about something called invisible disabilities. These are medical conditions that you can't see just by looking at someone, but that affect their daily lives in significant ways." Emma's heart began racing. This couldn't be about her. This couldn't be happening. "We have a student here at Riverside Elementary who demonstrates extraordinary courage every single day," Dr. Morrison continued. "Emma Clark lives with severe anxiety disorder and sensory processing challenges. Some of you may have noticed she has 5 service dogs who help her manage these conditions." The entire cafeteria turned to look at Emma. Heat flooded her face. Atlas immediately pressed closer, sensing her rising anxiety. But Emma felt exposed in a way that no amount of deep pressure therapy could fix. "I want to tell you Emma's story," Dr. Morrison said, "because I think it's important for you to understand what real strength looks like." "Dr. Morrison, I don't think—" Principal Chen started, noticing Emma's distress. But Emma surprised everyone, including herself, by standing up. "It's okay," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "They should know. If it helps even one person understand, then it's worth being uncomfortable." Dr. Morrison looked at Emma with respect that seemed to fill the small girl with borrowed strength. "Emma, would you like to tell your story yourself?" Every instinct Emma had screamed to say no, to sit down, to hide behind her dogs and let someone else speak for her. But she thought about Marcus's sister, alone in her room for a year. She thought about other kids who might be struggling with invisible challenges, afraid to ask for help, because they'd seen how Emma was treated. "Okay," Emma whispered, though the word felt like jumping off a cliff. Walking to the front of the cafeteria with all 5 dogs took every ounce of courage Emma possessed. The walk was only 30 feet, but it felt like 30 miles. Every eye in the room watched her, some curious, some sympathetic, some still holding remnants of the mockery that had defined her school experience. "My name is Emma," she began, her voice barely audible. Athena pressed against her leg, providing the courage to continue. "And I have anxiety disorder. That means my brain tells me that normal things are dangerous. Loud noises feel like threats. Crowds feel overwhelming. Unexpected changes feel scary." She could see some students fidgeting, uncomfortable with the vulnerability being displayed, but others were leaning forward, genuinely listening. "When I was very young," Emma continued, her voice growing slightly stronger, "I couldn't leave my house at all. Even my own backyard felt too big, too scary. My parents tried everything, therapy and medication and different treatments. Nothing worked well enough. Dr. Morrison stood nearby, ready to step in if Emma needed support, but letting the girl tell her own story. Then we learned about service dogs," Emma said. "But one dog wasn't enough for how much help I needed. So my parents found a special training program that would train 5 dogs to work as a team. It took years. It cost money we didn't really have. But my parents believed I deserved a chance to have a normal life." Emma's voice cracked slightly. "Each of these dogs has a specific job. Atlas provides deep pressure therapy when I feel an anxiety attack coming. Athena interrupts negative thought patterns before they spiral. Zeus, Apollo, and Hercules monitor my environment for potential triggers and create safe space around me." She looked around the cafeteria, making eye contact with some of the students who'd mocked her most cruelly. "Some of you have called me Dog Girl. You've barked at me in the hallways. You've said I'm weird, that I'm faking, that my parents are irresponsible. And those words hurt. They hurt a lot." Dylan Williams, sitting 3 tables away, had the decency to look ashamed. "But what hurt more," Emma continued, tears now visible but her voice still steady, "is that none of you ever asked why. You just decided I was weird and treated me like I was less than human. You made every school day harder than it already was." The cafeteria was silent now, the kind of silence that comes when people realize they've been complicit in causing pain. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad," Emma said. "I'm telling you this because there might be other kids here who are struggling with things you can't see. Maybe someone has depression. Maybe someone has learning disabilities. Maybe someone has family problems at home. And if you've learned anything from how you treated me, I hope it's that being different doesn't mean being less than. It means working harder for things other people get easily." Emma's legs were shaking now, her emotional reserves nearly depleted. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on Emma's shoulder. "Thank you, Emma," Dr. Morrison said, her own voice thick with emotion. "That took incredible courage. Students, I want you to think about what Emma shared today. I want you to think about how you can be part of making this school a place where everyone feels safe and supported." As Emma walked back to her seat, something unexpected happened. One student started clapping, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire cafeteria was applauding. Not the mocking kind of applause, but genuine appreciation for the courage it took to be that vulnerable in front of people who'd been cruel. Emma collapsed into her seat, emotionally exhausted. Marcus handed her a napkin to wipe her tears, his own eyes suspiciously moist. "That was amazing," Marcus whispered. "You're like a superhero." "I don't feel like a superhero," Emma admitted. "I feel like I might throw up." "Even better," Marcus grinned. "Superheroes who throw up are way more relatable." The rest of the school day brought more changes than Emma could have anticipated. Students who'd previously avoided her now smiled tentatively in the hallways. A girl from her math class named Sophie approached during passing period to apologize for laughing when others mocked her. Even Dylan Williams, though he didn't apologize directly, stopped making his cruel comments. But the most significant change came when Emma was leaving school that afternoon. She was walking toward the pickup area where Sarah waited with the van, when she heard shouting from the nearby playground. A small crowd of students had gathered, their voices rising in that particular pitch that signals something wrong. Emma's first instinct was to avoid it, to get to the safety of the van and let adults handle whatever was happening. But then she heard a voice she recognized. "Stop it! Leave me alone!" Marcus. Emma changed direction immediately, the 5 dogs responding to her urgency by tightening their formation around her. As she pushed through the crowd of students, she saw Marcus cornered against the fence by 3 older boys she didn't recognize, likely from the middle school next door. "Look at the dummy trying to read," one of the boys was mocking, holding what looked like Marcus's homework paper. "What's wrong? Can't figure out these big words?" "Give it back," Marcus said, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "Make me, dyslexic freak." Emma didn't think about what she was doing. She didn't calculate the risk or worry about her anxiety. She just moved forward, placing herself between Marcus and the bullies. "Leave him alone," Emma said, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. The 3 bullies looked down at the tiny girl with her 5 massive dogs, initially amused by the intervention. "What are you going to do about it, dog girl?" Atlas growled, a deep rumbling sound that made all 3 boys take a step back. It wasn't an aggressive growl, wasn't a prelude to attack. It was a warning. This child is protected, and you need to back away now. "Those are service dogs," Emma said, her hands steady on Atlas's head. "They're trained to protect me and anyone I'm with when we're being threatened. You're threatening my friend. I suggest you leave before my dogs interpret that as a danger that needs to be addressed." It was a bluff. The dogs were trained for Emma's anxiety management, not for aggressive protection. But the bullies didn't know that, and the sight of 5 German shepherds standing in protective formation was sufficiently intimidating. "Whatever," the leader of the group dropped Marcus's paper. "He's not worth it anyway." As the bullies slunk away, Marcus picked up his homework with shaking hands. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Emma said simply. "You sat with me when I was alone. You defended me when Dylan was cruel. Friends protect friends." Marcus looked at Emma with something like awe. "I thought you said you weren't brave." "I'm not," Emma admitted, her own hands starting to shake now that the adrenaline was fading. "I'm absolutely terrified. But you told me brave is being terrified and doing the thing anyway." They walked to the pickup area together, Emma's dogs maintaining their protective formation around both children now. Sarah was waiting at the van, having witnessed the entire interaction from a distance. "Emma Clark," Sarah said as they approached, her voice a mixture of pride and concern. "We need to talk about appropriate ways to handle bullying situations." "I know, Mom," Emma said, "but I couldn't just leave him there." Sarah pulled both children into a hug. "I know, baby, I know, and I'm proud of you. Terrified, but proud." That evening, the doorbell rang at the Clark house. Sarah answered to find Marcus and his mother standing on the porch, looking emotional. "I'm Jennifer Wilson, Marcus's mom," the woman said. "We wanted to thank Emma for what she did today." Jennifer held out a sealed envelope with trembling hands. "My daughter Amanda wanted to come, but she wasn't quite ready to leave the house yet. She hasn't left her room in months, but she begged me to give you this." Emma took the note and opened it. It read, "I heard what you said in the cafeteria about facing anxiety. I've been hiding for so long, but watching someone so young be so brave made me realize I need to try harder. Thank you for showing me it's possible." Emma, standing behind her mother, felt overwhelmed by the words on the paper. "I'm not trying to be brave," Emma whispered, looking up at Jennifer. "I'm just trying to survive." "That's exactly what Amanda needs to hear," Jennifer said softly. "That survival is a form of bravery, too." Before Emma could answer, more neighbors appeared. Mr. Chen from the corner store brought fresh baked goods. Patricia Wells came with a written apology for her previous judgment. Even some of the children from the neighborhood showed up, including a young girl Emma recognized from down the street. "My mom has anxiety too," the girl said shyly. "She hasn't left our house in months. When I told her about you, she cried. She said if a kid can be brave enough to face it, maybe she can try too." Sarah and David watched as their living room filled with neighbors who'd once judged them, who'd once called them irresponsible, who'd once made their daughter's life miserable. But now these same people came with apologies, with questions, with a genuine desire to understand. Emma sat on the couch, surrounded by her 5 loyal dogs, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Part of her wanted to retreat to her room, to hide from all these people and their expectations. But another part of her, a part that was growing stronger every day, recognized that this was an opportunity. "It's hard," Emma said when someone asked her how she managed her anxiety. "It's hard every single day. Some days are better than others. Some days I can't even get out of bed. But I try. I keep trying because giving up means letting my anxiety win. How did you know you needed service dogs? Another neighbor asked. Sarah answered this one. We tried everything else first. Traditional therapy, medication, exposure therapy, with just human support. Nothing worked well enough. Emma's anxiety was so severe that she couldn't function in normal environments. The service dogs were our last hope. How much does something like that cost? Patricia Wells asked, genuinely curious now rather than judgmental. More than we could afford, David admitted. We took out loans. We worked extra jobs. We did whatever we had to do because our daughter deserved a chance at a normal life. Emma watched her parents' faces as they described the sacrifices they'd made. Sacrifices she'd known about intellectually, but was only now beginning to understand emotionally. They'd given up so much, worked so hard, endured judgment and criticism from neighbors and even family members who thought they were being excessive. All for her. All so she could walk through a neighborhood without feeling like she was drowning. I'm sorry, Emma whispered, though her parents were across the room and couldn't hear her. But Atlas did. The big dog pressed closer, providing the grounding pressure that told Emma she was valued. She was worth it. She was loved. As the neighbors gradually left, each offering some form of apology or support, Emma finally retreated to her room with her 5 constant companions. She was exhausted in every possible way, but she also felt something new, hope. Maybe things could change. Maybe people could learn. Maybe being different didn't mean being alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. School would still be difficult. Her anxiety wouldn't magically disappear. But today had proven that courage could be contagious, that vulnerability could be powerful, that one small voice speaking truth could ripple out in ways impossible to predict. Emma fell asleep that night surrounded by her dogs, her dreams filled with possibilities instead of fears for the first time in longer than she could remember. The weeks following Emma's cafeteria speech brought transformations that rippled through Riverside Elementary, like stones dropped into still water. The changes weren't dramatic or sudden, but rather the kind of gradual shift that happens when people begin to see the world through different eyes. Mrs. Peterson had requested a meeting with all the teachers to discuss invisible disabilities and how to create more inclusive classroom environments. The school librarian, Mrs. Chen, started a lunch program called Different is Beautiful, where students could share their own struggles and learn about various conditions that affected their classmates. Even the school nurse began conducting educational sessions about service animals and why they weren't pets but medical equipment. But the most significant change came from somewhere Emma never expected. Dylan Williams asked to speak with her. It happened during morning recess, when Emma was sitting under her favorite tree with Marcus. The 5 dogs sprawled around them in their usual protective formation. Emma was reading while Marcus worked on his homework, using the colored overlays that helped him process text more easily. Emma, can I talk to you? Emma looked up to see Dylan standing a respectful distance away, his body language uncertain in a way she'd never seen before. Gone was the swagger and cruelty that had defined every previous interaction. What do you want? Marcus asked, his voice protective. I just want to talk, Dylan said. Please. Emma studied him carefully, looking for signs of mockery or trap. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Okay. Dylan sat down on the grass, maintaining enough distance that the dogs didn't react defensively. He stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. I've been thinking about what you said in the cafeteria, Dylan began, his voice quiet. About how none of us asked why, about how we just decided you were weird and treated you bad because of it. Emma waited, not sure where this was going. My brother has autism, Dylan said suddenly, the words tumbling out like they'd been held back too long. He's younger than me. He has meltdowns in public places. People stare, people make comments, and I hate them for it. I hate how they judge him without knowing him. The confession hung in the air. Marcus exchanged a surprised glance with Emma. But then I realized, Dylan continued, his voice breaking slightly, I was doing the exact same thing to you. I was being the person I hate when they look at my brother. Tears were streaming down Dylan's face now, and Emma felt her own throat tighten with emotion. I'm sorry, Dylan said. I'm so sorry for everything. For the barking in the hallways, for calling you dog girl, for making every day harder when you were already struggling. I was awful, and you didn't deserve any of it. Emma had imagined this moment countless times, had fantasized about Dylan apologizing and what she would say. In her fantasies, she'd been cold and dismissive, had made him feel as small as he'd made her feel. But now, faced with genuine remorse from someone who finally understood, Emma found she didn't want revenge. She just wanted the cruelty to stop. "Why were you so mean?" Emma asked. "If you know how it feels to have someone you love treated badly, why did you do it to someone else?" Dylan wiped his face with his sleeve. "Because I was angry. Angry at all the people who are mean to my brother. Angry at my parents for always being stressed. Angry at myself for being embarrassed of him sometimes. And it was easier to be angry at you than to deal with my own stuff." It was the most honest answer Emma had ever heard from anyone who'd hurt her. "My therapist says I was projecting," Dylan continued, "taking my feelings about one situation and putting them on something else. But that's not an excuse. What I did was wrong, and I need to make it right." "How?" Emma asked simply. "I don't know," Dylan admitted, "but I want to try, if you'll let me." Emma looked at Marcus, who shrugged, as if to say the decision was hers. She looked at her 5 dogs, who remained calm and unthreatened by Dylan's presence. Then she looked back at Dylan, this boy who'd made her life miserable, but who was now offering something she'd never expected: genuine change. "You can start by telling your friends to stop," Emma said. "The barking, the comments, all of it. Make them understand that it's not okay." "I will," Dylan promised. "And Emma, would it be okay if maybe sometime you could meet my brother? I think he'd like your dogs. And I think maybe you'd understand him better than most people." Before Emma could respond, Principal Chen's voice came over the playground speakers. "Emma Clark, please report to the main office." Emma Clark to the main office. Emma's anxiety spiked immediately. Being called to the office usually meant something bad. Atlas pressed against her, providing grounding pressure before she even asked. "I'll come with you," Marcus offered, standing up. "Me too," Dylan said, "if you want." Emma looked at these 2 boys, one who'd become her first real friend, and one who was trying to become something better than he'd been. Okay. The walk to the main office felt eternal, Emma's mind racing through possibilities of what might have gone wrong. Had someone complained about the dogs again? Had there been another incident with neighbors? Had she done something wrong without realizing it? But when she entered Principal Chen's office, she found him smiling broadly. Beside him sat a woman Emma didn't recognize, professional and polished in appearance. "Emma, thank you for coming," Principal Chen said warmly. "This is Ms. Jennifer Santos from the State Education Board. She'd like to talk to you about something exciting." Ms. Santos stood, her smile genuine and warm. "Emma, I've heard about what you've been doing here at Riverside Elementary, how you've been educating your classmates about invisible disabilities and advocating for inclusive environments." Emma glanced at Marcus and Dylan, confused about where this was going. "The State Education Board is developing a new program," Ms. Santos continued. "We want to create educational materials about service animals and invisible disabilities for schools across the state, and we'd like you to be part of it." "Me?" Emma's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You," Mrs. Santos confirmed. "Your story is powerful, Emma. The way you've turned your own struggles into education for others. The way you've helped your classmates understand what it means to live with an invisible disability. We think students across the state could benefit from hearing your perspective." Emma felt dizzy with the magnitude of what was being suggested. "I don't know if I can do that. Speaking in the cafeteria was scary enough." "You wouldn't be alone," Ms. Santos assured her. "We'd be creating videos, written materials, and interactive programs. You'd work with a team of educators and medical professionals, and everything would be done at your pace, with accommodations for your anxiety." Principal Chen leaned forward. "Emma, you don't have to decide right now. Take some time to think about it. Talk to your parents. But I want you to know that I think you'd be perfect for this. You've already changed this school. Imagine what you could do for students across the entire state." After Ms. Santos left, Emma sat in Principal Chen's office trying to process what had just happened. Marcus and Dylan sat on either side of her, both looking equally amazed. "That's incredible," Marcus said. "You're going to be like a famous advocate." "I don't want to be famous," Emma said. I just want to be normal. Emma, Dylan said quietly, I don't think you figured out yet that normal is boring. What you're doing, helping people understand stuff they never thought about before, that's way better than normal. That afternoon, Emma's parents were waiting at the usual pickup spot, but they weren't alone. Amanda, Marcus's older sister, stood with them, looking nervous but determined. Emma, Amanda said as Emma approached, I have something to tell you, or show you, actually. Amanda pulled out her phone and showed Emma a video. It was Amanda herself, standing in what looked like her front yard, speaking to the camera. My name is Amanda Wilson, and I've been hiding in my house for over a year because of severe anxiety, video Amanda said. But recently, I met someone who changed my perspective. Emma Clark is barely more than half my age, but she's braver than I've ever been. If she can face her fears every single day, then I can start trying too. This is me, taking my first step outside my yard in 14 months. The video showed Amanda walking down her driveway, tears streaming down her face, but walking nonetheless. The video had been posted online and already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments from people sharing their own struggles with anxiety. You inspired me, real Amanda said, tears in her eyes again. And apparently I'm inspiring others too. People are sharing their stories, talking about their invisible disabilities, creating this whole community of support. Emma felt overwhelmed by the ripple effect her simple decision to be honest had created. She just wanted people at school to understand why she needed her dogs. She'd never imagined it would spread beyond those cafeteria walls. There's more, Sarah said gently, pulling out her own phone. A local news station wants to interview you. A disability advocacy organization wants you to speak at their conference. And Emma, honey, we've received over 100 messages from parents whose children have invisible disabilities, thanking you for speaking up. Emma sat down on the curb, Atlas immediately pressing against her. This was too much, too big, too overwhelming. I can't do all that, Emma whispered. I can barely handle school. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. David knelt beside his daughter. But Emma, you need to understand something. You've started something important. You've given voice to people who felt voiceless. That's a rare and precious gift. But I'm just a kid with anxiety, Emma said. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just trying to survive. That's what makes you special, Amanda said. You're not trying to be anything other than yourself. You're not pretending your struggles don't exist. You're just being honest about them. And that honesty is helping more people than you realize. That evening, the Clark house was filled with activity again. Jennifer Santos had come to the house to discuss the education program in more detail. A reporter from the local disability advocacy group arrived to discuss potential involvement. Phone calls came from schools across the city, asking if Emma would be willing to share her story. Emma retreated to her room, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. The 5 dogs followed, as they always did, arranging themselves around her in their protective formation. This is scary, Emma whispered to Atlas. Everything is changing too fast. Atlas simply pressed closer, his steady presence a reminder that no matter what changed externally, some things remained constant. Her dogs would always be there. Her parents would always support her. And she would always have a choice about how much or how little she wanted to participate in this unexpected movement she'd sparked. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Emma, it's Marcus. Can I come in? Okay. Marcus entered, followed by his mother and Amanda. They sat on the floor, careful to give Emma and the dogs plenty of space. I know this is all crazy and overwhelming, Marcus said, but I wanted to tell you something. Remember how I told you I got bullied at my old school for being dyslexic? Emma nodded. Today, I told my new class about it, Marcus continued. During our reading time, I asked Mrs. Peterson if I could explain why I read differently. And you know what happened? 3 other kids raised their hands and said they had learning disabilities too. They'd been hiding it, embarrassed, thinking they were the only ones. Because you were brave enough to be honest first, Amanda added. Other people felt safe being honest too. Marcus's mother, Jennifer, spoke up. Emma, my son has gained more confidence in the few weeks since meeting you than he had in the entire year before. Watching you face your challenges inspired him to face his own. That's the gift you're giving people. Emma looked around at these people who'd become so important to her life in such a short time. She thought about Dylan's apology, about the students who'd stopped mocking and started supporting, about the ripple effects spreading beyond her school, her neighborhood, her immediate world. "I'm scared," Emma admitted. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make things worse instead of better?" "Then you'll learn and try again," Sarah said from the doorway, having heard the conversation. "Emma, being an advocate doesn't mean being perfect. It means being willing to try, to be honest, to show people that invisible disabilities are real and deserve accommodation and understanding. Your dad and I will be with you every step," Sarah continued. "We'll help you manage the anxiety that comes with this attention. We'll make sure you're never overwhelmed beyond your capacity. And if you decide it's too much, we'll support that decision too." Emma looked down at Atlas, at Athena, at Zeus and Apollo and Hercules. These 5 dogs had given her the ability to function in a world that felt too big, too loud, too overwhelming. They'd given her the courage to face each day despite the terror that lived constantly in her nervous system. Maybe now it was time to use that courage for something bigger than just her own survival. "Okay," Emma said quietly. "I'll try, but slowly, and with help." "That's all anyone can ask," David said, pride evident in his voice. As the visitors eventually left and the house quieted for the evening, Emma sat with her journal, something her therapist had encouraged her to keep. She wrote about the strange journey from being mocked as the weird dog girl to becoming someone whose story inspired others. She wrote about Dylan's apology and what it meant to forgive someone who'd caused real harm. She wrote about Marcus's friendship and how being understood was a gift she'd never appreciated before. She wrote about Amanda's courage in leaving her house and how strange it felt to be someone's inspiration when she still felt so broken inside. Most of all, she wrote about the terrifying realization that her story was bigger than herself now, that her choice to be vulnerable had created space for others to be vulnerable too. "Dear future Emma," she wrote at the bottom of the page, "I don't know what happens next. I'm still scared most of the time. I still need my dogs just to function. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared and doing it anyway is what courage actually means. Maybe I don't have to be fixed to be worthy. Maybe I just have to be honest." As Emma drifted off to sleep that night, surrounded by the warm, steady presence of her 5 protectors, she didn't yet know about the changes tomorrow would bring. Didn't know about the television interview that would reach millions. Didn't know about the other children with invisible disabilities who would find hope in her story. Didn't know about the schools that would transform their policies because one small voice had spoken truth. All she knew was that tomorrow she would wake up. She would face her fears. She would continue trying. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough.